Hush, my rose, still, and look at the moon tonight. Do you see the shadows there? This world is full of twisty frights and spooks who love to scare. Feel how the wind blows through your bones. See the treetops shake and shiver. Just like the wind, we take to flight and make the groan and quiver. Lulu, 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 la la lulu, la la lulu. There is magic inside of you. Hush, my rose, still, and watch as they fly away with the moonlight on their wings. You'll join their merry haunt someday. Hear how they howl and sing. There is magic inside of you. Light on your feet, past windows you creep. Follow the cat, as black as ink. One step ahead, while they're tucked in bed, you'll find secrets dark and secrets deep. Lulu, 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 la la la, lulu, la la lulu. There is magic inside of you. There is magic inside of you.
All right, and that was The Witch's Daughter by Ashley Serena. Yeah, that might become my fun little song for every show. Who knows? They don't even tag me on it because I, borrowed the song from YouTube. So that's always a good one. Now, tonight I've got Denise Pridemore and Jen Smith with me. We're going to talk a bunch about Appalachian folklore, magic, granny magic, the whole 9 yards. I was doing some research into that, and my goodness, one little step and you're falling down a 9,000-foot rabbit hole and into all kinds of different areas. But Denise and Jen both have family that dates back, I'm not sure exactly how many generations, but they're going to share some of what was passed down to them, and folklore, magic's the whole 9 yards. It's all fun, it's all good. So I've got them on the line. So Jen, Denise, how are y'all doing this evening?
Doing great.
Good deal.
I'm terrific. It's been a crazy week, but parenting teenagers is never easy. So this is a nice break.
It's a good, it's a distraction at the very least. A little adulting, a little fun away from the young'uns, right?
This is true. Mm-hmm. This is true. But I think this will be an excellent opportunity, and thank you so much for inviting me to join you.
Absolutely. If you want to tell us and the audience a little bit about it yourself, we can move on and get Denise to do the same, and cruise into our subject matter.
I'd be delighted to.
Okay.
I currently live in Berea, Kentucky, which is the arts and crafts capital of Kentucky. We are at the gateway to Appalachia. So we are a small, very artsy, we joke, granola crunching, hippie tree hugging sort of community. And I grew up in Texas, but my mother's family, my grandmother's family, my great-grandmother were all from Appalachia. And when I was much younger, I tended not to have any interest in it at all. It was just something that didn't appeal to me because it was so different from a modern life in Dallas, Fort Worth, and going to college in Austin. But I ended up in Kentucky, and the older I've gotten, the more I've begun to appreciate those things that I learned from my grandmother, who was born in 1897 and was the daughter of a medicine woman, and from other family members. And it's so nice to see things come full circle, and some of those things that I learned are now becoming more typical, and you see them more in just average everyday culture when it comes to herbal medicine and natural healing. Then when we get into ghosts and ghoulies, there's all kinds of good things there too. But it's nice to see it become more mainstream. And I'm really enjoying learning more about that part of my family that I wasn't as familiar with when I was a bit younger.
Awesome. Very good. Denise, you?
Well, in my case, my family has always been, well, my family is a hodgepodge mess of everything.
I've heard you talk about them a few times, and I'm like, man, she's lived everywhere and has family everywhere.
I do. My mother's from Saltville, Virginia, and my father's from Lynchburg, Virginia. But my family is Native American on both sides of my family. Recently found out that I'm Blackfoot on my mother's side, but I'm also Cherokee on my father's side. So, needless to say, don't irritate me.
Well, I figured the Irish and me, you got the same thing going there, yes.
I also have Irish and English.
Mm-hmm. And a little Scottish like me, and kind of a mix.
And I recently found out that I'm also Viking. So I have got a lot of things to learn about things. But so needless to say, we brought over a lot of things from, Ireland into the family that was already here. So when my family started getting mixed up with all of these other things, because we even have family that was on the House of Burgesses. So if you go back to John Carrington, when the government was being formed here in the United States, that's a big deal. So we have people so we kind of have John Smith, Pocahontas kind of thing going on somewhere in my family if you go back far enough. So it's kind of strange. So in my family, we have a mix of Appalachian, Irish, Scottish, all kinds of different folklore that goes along with that. But if you do enough research into it, you'll find out that it's amazingly similar to all the other cultures, as we were talking about on Wednesday night.
Right.
How similar it is to the Ozark culture here in Missouri and Arkansas. But I can't wait to hear what Jen has to add, because my mom, when she passed, she lived in Pikeville, Kentucky. So my last 30 years has been running back and forth to Kentucky. So I know the Kentucky, the three different parts of Kentucky, which most people say that there's two. When you get past Lexington, you've got the east and the west. No, there's a different part. That southern part of Kentucky is totally different from the east and the west. So I don't know about you, but that's how I see it when I'm there. It's that eastern part is so different than any other place in the world. So once you get on that Appalachian Trail, it is, I don't know, you're transported back in time. And I know Jen probably feels the same way.
Absolutely. And ironically, Denise, we're probably related. My great-grandmother, my great-grandmother was half Cherokee. I have some wonderful photographs of her, and it is so incredibly obvious when you look at old photographs that she was Cherokee. She came from somewhere in Virginia and married my great-grandfather, and they came via wagons and a train from Virginia into Kentucky about 1899. My grandmother was 2. She says she has a vague memory of being on the train with her sisters, while her father and 4 brothers, there were 7 children. She was the 7th child of a 7th child. But they came across the mountains with horses and wagons and cattle and drove into eastern Kentucky and ended up with a land grant of something like 1,000 acres. And so there's Scotch and Irish on my family on that side. My father's family is a whole other story that we won't even get into tonight. I was telling Wendy about it the other day. But my great-grandmother was a medicine woman, and she was a healer. And in the very small town and community that she lived in, she was the one that people brought the sick, the dying, the injured, the pregnant mothers to. And my grandmother, who lived to be 99 and a half and had all of her faculties, which is just amazing to me, would tell me stories about coming home, and there would be a man, you know, who'd been injured at the sawmill laying on their kitchen table as my great-grandmother sewed him up and used flour and sugar and a poultice to, you know, heal his wounds and send him along his merry way. And how she was paid in chickens or hogs or, you know, molasses or sorghum or whatever for her healing talents. And it's really interesting to see how much similarity, you're right, that there is between that folk culture, no matter where you go within the United States, or really around the world, because we tend to carry with us those legends and histories and memories, culturally, I guess. I agree with you that there is a difference. There is a huge difference between far southeastern Kentucky and the hills and the hollers, and central Kentucky, Lexington, certainly Louisville, and Paducah. Paducah is a whole other world. But you're right. When you go into deep eastern Kentucky, it is another world. It is very different culturally. You will find some of the kindest, most wonderful people ever who do some amazing things, whether it's internet or writing or creating or painting or whatever. But they've managed to hold on to something that most of us have lost, which I think is that contact with our past and our family history. And I really regret that when I was younger, I did not record some of those things, because now I want to know so much more than I did at, 15 or 20, when everybody sat around and told their stories. And, as a kid, I wasn't particularly thrilled that if I got cut, Grandma was going to slap something gross on whatever injury I had to heal it. I have horrible memories of mustard plasters involving cooked onions on my chest with flannel when I had bronchitis or a sore throat. I have terrible, terrible memories of things like flour, as I said, flour and sugar in a poultice. And she used to tell me, if I couldn't sleep, that I would drink what I thought was Cammy Neal's tea. And I thought my grandma had this friend who made really awful tea. It was chamomile. I didn't understand. So, I have those kinds of memories. If you step on a splinter, you shred a potato and wrap it in a clean cloth, put the potato against the splinter or the cut, whatever you need to draw something out of, wrap it in a cloth, and it will expel the, pus and infection and stickers or splinters or whatever. I have all of those memories, which actually as a parent have come in kind of handy. My kids are college age now, although I still refer to them as teenagers. My eldest would be offended. But, it's nice to know that there are some alternatives, whether it's, honey and lemon or fresh ginger or, how to treat something without necessarily going directly for a pharmaceutical solution. But I know that there's a lot that I've missed out on, simply because when I was younger, I didn't have that interest that I now, embrace so strongly. But it's nice to see that it carries forward. But you're right, eastern Kentucky and into Appalachia, and when you go on the Appalachian Trail from, Appalachia is 12 states. The Appalachian Mountains go up to New Brunswick, Canada, and down to Alabama. So there's a large area. Parts of Mississippi are even considered to be part of Appalachia. So it's a very interesting and diverse culture. And, in my family's case, and probably in Denise's as well, when people came from Ireland and Scotland and Wales even, they found familiarity in the soft hills and valleys of Appalachia. It looked like home, and so they stayed. And my family doesn't go back as many generations as many people do, but there is that sense of this is where we've always been. I have a dear friend who's an Episcopal priest who's from Scotland, and I said to him once, of all the places, why did you end up here? And he goes, oh, it's just like home. And it is, because to him, he's familiar with the clans and the culture and the language, and he felt as comfortable and familiar here as he did in the Glens in Scotland. So it's a pretty nifty place to be.
It is. I mean, I met this woman up on the mountain in Pikeville. And, well, not really Pikeville. Is what was it called? Cherokee Holler.
Okay.
Okay.
I know Pikeville. Gotcha.
It's actually south near Virgie. My mom
actually
lives in Virgie near Long Fork. Okay.
I know exactly.
Yeah, she's the only house that doesn't flood. Okay, was. But so where Long Fork is, you go up Long Fork and you keep going up, and it comes into this little road that becomes one lane. Hopefully you don't meet anybody. But
exactly.
she's a moonshiner, and her name is Lula. Okay. What's unusual about that is my name is Lula. Okay. I don't go by it, but that's my name. And her son is the minister who did my mother's husband's funeral. And he walks around and when he ministers, he looks like a chicken. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So you're everybody there is used to it, but for me, he's sitting there doing doing the thing for my stepfather's funeral, and he's at there talking, and his wings arms are just going, and I'm going, okay, I can't look at him because I'm going to laugh. Okay. So this is what I know. He reminds me of a chicken. Okay, but I met this woman about 25 years ago. And what was important about her is her son's minister. Pike County's a dry county. Pikeville is not. But the rest of the county's dry. She's a moonshiner. Wendy knew where this was going to eventually go.
Yep.
And so my mom doesn't drink. But my mom wanted me to meet her because, I always complained about being named Lula. But she took me up there, and the lady proceeded to show me not only her still, which I don't know why she showed me, because normally people don't show that stuff. But she proceeded to show me her still. She proceeded to show me her medicines. That's what she called them, her medicines. Mm-hmm. And it was all of her roots. So she also did ginseng, which is all over down there. Showed me her ginseng and was telling me how important it was. She had to be, she couldn't have been a day under 95. And she walked around like a chicken as well. But I never said a word because, she'd probably beat my butt. But she had a story to go with where every piece of this ginseng came from. She had a story to tell me how to use each piece of that ginseng because of where it came from, how it was supposed to be used. It wasn't that it was ginseng. It was where that ginseng was found and what kind of soil and where it was found on the mountain at what time of day that it was supposed to be used.
Oh, how interesting. And you probably never even made a note, right?
No, because I was like, remember, this was 20-some years ago.
Well, true, yeah.
I'm just thinking that this is neat that my mom has taken me up here to meet this woman. My mom brought her a casserole and stuff. She lived to be about 107.
Oh, fantastic. Wow.
And so, but, I only went up there with my mom twice, because I couldn't tell you how to get up there. When you ride in the car, you just don't really pay attention to where you're going. And especially on those roads where I call them kiss your ass turns, where you go around the turn and you can see the back of the car as you're turning. It's like the car's going, it's like a cartoon. And there's a lot of those going over there. But I remember her telling me, you know, don't do this with this piece of ginseng because this one can kill you. And I was like, what? And it's like, I told my mom when we got back in the car, I go, I really wish that I had a tape recorder with me. Mm-hmm. You know, digital recorders didn't, if they existed, I didn't know at the time.
At that time, probably not.
No, they probably did. I mean, 20 years ago is not that long ago. It's just I probably didn't even think about it. Mm-hmm. And I said, I really wish I could have taken some of that down because it really would have been fun to have talked to her some more. And the second time we went up there, I didn't know we were going, so I didn't know to bring anything with me. But when we got back, I sat down and I wrote everything down. Lost it all when we moved.
Oh, no. Darn it.
Yeah. But like I said, she was such an interesting person. And there's a lot of people like that in Pikeville. And, you know, going to see my aunt down in Bristol. You know, that's how I found out I was Blackfoot. Was sitting there visiting with my aunt just this past June. I found out I was Blackfoot. 54 years old, and I find out I'm Blackfoot. And I've been telling everybody I'm Cherokee. And apparently I am, and that the story about my grandmother being on the Trail of Tears was a different grandma. But she was still on the Trail of Tears. It was the same story, but it was a different grandma than I thought it was this grandma, and it was a different one.
Right.
But the story was still true. So, I don't know. Jen, do you have any unusual stories from people you randomly met that you were supposed to meet in your life?
You know, that's a very interesting question. I think that, you know, nobody comes into our life by accident, mm-hmm. and everybody that we meet brings us some small gift of one kind or another. And the one thing that I have to say with regards to the old folks of Appalachia, I guess, when I'm talking about, you know, people born before the turn of the century, is there is such a dignity in these people that transcends circumstance and situation. I know that my grandmother was the youngest of 7, and she had one older brother who had been a teacher who retired. I always called him Uncle Lloyd. There was no distinction. My mother was an only child, so people who should have been great uncles and great aunts just got the basic aunt or uncle moniker from me. But what I remember most about him was the time and attention he spent on me as a child and the dignity with which he shared information. One of the interesting things that I learned from Uncle Lloyd was that if you find a poisonous plant in the wild here in Kentucky, within 3 feet in one direction from that plant, if you turn in a circle, there will be an antidote for it. So if you run into poison ivy, within 3 feet of the poison ivy will be something that you can use to help heal your body from it. I also learned the importance of, when you deal with herbs, using the whole herb versus just picking pieces and parts, which I thought was really interesting because I've always, as from teenage years on, I've been super interested in herbs and herbalism and how we can use homeopathic and naturopathic medicine. And if you look back at Appalachia, that's how they survived. Mm-hmm. So I have those memories. I've heard so many stories about life at a time before there were, I hate doing this on the radio because I have to pause. There's a joke in Kentucky that if something goes wrong, it's going to take 20 years to get here. And that's really not true anymore. But 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was definitely a gap between what was going on in New York and Dallas and Los Angeles and what was going on in small towns in Appalachia and certainly in eastern Kentucky. And so there is very much a sense of self-sufficiency and the determination to accomplish whatever you need with what you have. So met some interesting people. There was a little old lady in McKee, Kentucky, which is the county seat of Jackson County, where my grandmother lived at one point, who owned a store. And her store was so old that she still wrapped everything in paper and tied it with twine. And she collected she collected hornets' nests. And I have no clue to this day why. But she had within her store giant gray paper hornets' nests hanging from the ceiling, and people would bring them to her. And I know that from some of the little bit of research I've done in recent years that you can use some of the paper to stop bleeding, some of the, whatever the paper moth hornet extrusion.
The nest is made of, yeah.
Exactly. To stop bleeding. But this little weird lady named Miss Hawcom collected hornets' nests. And I wish I had been old enough to have been able to risk saying, excuse me, why do you have hornets' nests hanging from your ceiling? But I was about 5, and she was terrified. So that's not a question I was willing to ask at that and I regret it to this day. So hopefully someone listening tonight will know something about hornets' nests and why you want to keep them, because I'm curious now. But
yeah, generally you want to avoid them.
Yes, yes. And I don't want to know how they killed the hornets, but these were huge. They were bigger than basketballs. Well, maybe they weren't quite that big. To a 5-year-old, they were larger than basketballs.
Sure, sure.
I think still pretty good size. But I, to this day, do not know why they were hanging from the ceiling in her store. But it was one of those general stores where you went to the counter and asked for something, and she disappeared and came back with it, and then wrapped it in white paper and tied it with twine. My grandmother bought me a hideous pair of shoes at her store. I will never forget. They were probably much older than I. But it's a neat place to live. It's a wonderful place in the world if you like hiking, if you like camping, if you like outdoor activities. This is where you want to be. There's some spooky attached to it. There's stories about goblins in the mines and, you know, couple of UFO sightings that have had some interest. There's stories about Bigfoots. There's stories about wildcats. There's stories about races of people that are not quite human here. But there is a sense, and I think Denise will probably agree, of the age. It's old. Kentucky feels old. Texas didn't. I've been all over the country. And I can honestly say, you know, even New England feels different than Kentucky. Kentucky feels old to me. It has this ancient, brooding quality. But it's sort of addictive, too. So once you start exploring it, there's this tendency and desire to want to do more. And there's a lot left for me to find out. I haven't done as much exploring and learning as I'd like to. But it's certainly fascinating, and I'm anxious to see what the future holds. Because after this, maybe somebody will suggest some other things that I need to go and do or go and see. Not Waverly Hills and Louisville. We're not doing that ghost hunt. But
nah, it's been done to death.
Yeah, I think I can skip that one.
Do you want to know why that lady was keeping the hornet's nest?
Yes, please.
I absolutely want to know why. Do you?
So,
Denise knows.
it's called Li Feng Fang in Chinese. And it is felt to be by the Chinese herbalists to be stronger than penicillin.
Oh, my word.
So,
wow.
It's a very strong antibiotic.
That makes sense because, like I said, I know that you could use it on cuts and for bleeding. That makes sense. Amazing. Well, thank you for your magic, Denise. I had not found that, and here you are. Your Google foo or your natural talent just blossomed tonight. Thank you. I had no idea.
Google foo. I like that.
It's my BS foo. I can. So, but no, I'm being Jake tonight. So.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Jake was extremely busy all weekend, and so he is. And this just doesn't seem to be his deal. So that's cool.
Well, I was interested when she said that. I was like, why? Why would you save that stuff? I'm terrified of bees and wasps. But I know hornets' nests are completely different. I know that they're big. They're like the size of a football. And
right.
So it's like, why? So I was interested. That's why I went looking for it. And it says traditional Chinese medicine, where they're documented for being effective for treating skin rashes, promoting blood coagulation, and treating mastitis. But it's also slightly toxic, so the dosage is important. But it also says that they feel like it's a stronger antibacterial effect than penicillin. So there you go. I mean, it's their triple antibiotic ointment. So
that's amazing. And it's interesting to see that overlap into Appalachian culture from the Far East. That's an interesting transition.
Well,
that's
absolutely.
Cool. It's hard to know, but like it says, key Western actions and medical uses: antifungal, insecticidal, detoxicant, impotence, ringworm, psoriasis, toothache, skin rashes, possible anti-cancer. And that's what it's saying in the Western use has been for, also known as wasp nest and honeycomb. In the Eastern, it says a few different things. It says it's used for lung, stomach, and kidney and liver. So in the Western, we're using it more for skin, where in the Eastern, they're using it more for internal. So this website that I found called White Rabbit Institute of Healing.com goes into more of how the Eastern would use it versus how the Western uses it. So it's giving you a few little different things. So in our culture, in the Western culture, we're using it topically only. In the Eastern culture, they're using it internally and externally.
Very neat. What was the website again?
White Rabbit Institute of Healing.com.
That's a long one.
Yes, we're going down a rabbit hole.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. No, I had written down to look up the significance of the nests, but thank you, Denise. That's perfect.
So,
wasp nest.
There you go.
Yep.
We cool. Learned something today.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. Now, you both have talked about the, I think it was sugar and flour poultices, where my grandma, who was from down in the Ozarks, down just this side of the Arkansas border, in a little town called Pineville, instead of Pikeville or anything, she would apply sugar soap poultices. And I'm just wondering if that's a regional difference or maybe a slightly different one. It's hard to know, isn't it?
I think it'd go either way, but I'm not sure on that. How about you, Jen?
I think it probably had to do with what was handy.
Probably.
You know, and age, too. You know, my great-grandmother would have made her soap, and it would have probably been lye soap, so that would have probably not been something that she would have wanted to use in a poultice unless she really needed to get rid of something awful. Whereas your grandma might have used, a different kind of soap as kind of a binder. But flour and sugar works, and it decreases scarring. I have a couple of bangs and cuts that should have been really, really bad that Grandma and her magic flour and sugar seemed to handle pretty well. But I'm guessing it had to do with what was handy. And it may have been a regional thing, too. That's something interesting to look into as well.
Right. Well, apparently, as we had talked on the phone yesterday, the Ozarks are included as part of an Appalachian-type society. So, just interesting, isn't it? It's very, very cool. And Grandpa was from Louisville, Kentucky, but, that's another story.
Well, if you're interested, Wendy, there's a book called Ozark Tales and Superstitions by Philip W. Steele. It talks a lot about the different Ozark cultures, and some of the things that I find funny in it is, in the back of the book it has a thing called Omens and Wishes, and it has bad luck omens and good luck omens and all this. Oh, some of them are really funny. Weather signs, not like the wet rock, hey, if it's a wet rock, it's raining out.
Yeah.
But it also has cures and remedies, and it talks about, like your teammate from wild catnip helps upset stomach and infant colic. I wouldn't see me giving, Ruby catnip tea. But you never know. I mean, and I got this, we can get this book online for probably $6.
Oh, that's not bad.
So right here's one. You're talking about poultice. It says, cuts heal more quickly if they're held over steam from boiling sassafras root. Here's one. Apply a poultice made from boiling wild horehound leaves, elm bark, and honey relieves sore throats and coughs.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it's got all kinds of stuff in here that's really interesting. It also has ghost stories, superstitions, different places that you can go. Also has Wild Bill Hickok, and just different places that you would find interesting. It may even have something about Pineville in here, but it also shows Frank and Jesse. Of course, in our part where we live, you can't have anything that doesn't have Frank and Jesse in it. Mm-hmm. But you would find this book interesting, and Legend of War Eagle. These are all places around here we've all been.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But like I said, it goes into some of the superstitions and stuff, and I got it at it was down at Wilson's Creek. They have it there at the park.
Oh, cool.
So, but in Shenandoah at the national park off near the Shenandoah River, there in West Virginia, they have similar books there about the superstitions of the people of the mountains there as well. From what I recall, I remember seeing one I wanted, but heck, I was like 12 years old. And my mom goes, "You don't need that stuff. I can tell you everything you want to know."
Oh, well.
Well, every trip we went on, we went, either Virginia or West Virginia. And I mean, if it wasn't for John Denver and, Almost Heaven, West Virginia, we wouldn't have anything to sing in the car.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, going up and down 81, I swear that there are more trees that got fertilized by my diapers along 81 and 95 than anybody would want to know about. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, that was every day for us. I mean, growing up until the time I was 15 years old, every trip revolved around going someplace. 90% of the time was into the Appalachian Mountains. If it wasn't there, it's the ocean. But that's how it was. So we always had something that had to do with it. Mm-hmm. Then since we moved to Kansas, every year it was a trip going through, going to Kentucky to see Mom, or going to Virginia Beach to see my sister. So I know, I can't say I know the mountains like the back of my hand, but I can tell you I know Mountain Parkway, except for the new changes that they've just made, like the back of my hand. I know 75 pretty good now too. So, it's interesting to see, even though the things have changed, it hasn't changed the people.
No, not even a little bit. Now, mine was probably more, it was going up and down 71 Highway when it was, 71 Highway was brand new, as far as two lanes each side of the road. It was the old path, and we went down home, a few times during the summer, and that was headed right into the Ozark Mountains, basically. I know exactly what you're talking about, Denise.
Well, I'm going to tell you, when they put that bypass in and made it 49, I did the happy dance. I didn't have to worry about the Pineville police getting me anymore.
Oh, no, you mean the Goodman police.
No, Pineville, Goodman, let's see, Anderson.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Oh, and Diamond.
Uh-huh, mm-hmm.
I knew them all.
Oh, okay. See, apparently, Grandma didn't worry about that part because of her grandpa being the circuit judge down there. And she was actually, you talked about Frank and Jesse James. When they made that movie, I believe it was 1938, but it might not have been. I lose track of these things quite often. I should have written it down. But her triplet brothers were in that movie, and they were quite young. And I can see Uncle Roy coming out of that saloon because I know his walk. I knew his walk, his whole persona there, and they were in the movie with, oh God, was it Errol Flynn? I think it was. But
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Anyway, they used the Pineville courthouse because of its authenticity. It hadn't been changed at all since golly, it was almost that time anyway. But there's all those caves and everything. It was just a very, very, very cool, diverse. Well, not really diverse. It just very different, its own little world down there, basically.
What a great story!
Isn't it though?
That really is.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Grandma says that Mary Lee, who later married one of the triplets, she got to be in the movie hanging out of one of the windows waving at Jesse James because she had big knockers.
Well, some attributes look better on TV. They stand out more.
That's right.
I know how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think I didn't get that much airtime on Ghost Adventures?
You didn't. You were not enhanced.
No, I was not. I was not enhanced, and I didn't wear enough makeup. I didn't wear enough blue eyeshadow to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Oh. Now,
So-
Jen, your mother was the seventh daughter of a seventh daughter. Is that correct?
My grandmother.
Grandmother. Okay, and she had the sight, right?
She had the sight. She
Mm-hmm.
did. She absolutely did. And my son does as well. I am probably more of an empath. I don't claim to have the talent that they did. I've read tarot for about 30 years, and I consider myself to be an empath. My son Jason talked to spirits from the time he was born until probably middle school, and then learned how to sort of manage it. My great-grandmother was the granny woman, and she was very, very talented. My grandmother was certainly psychic, and tended to predict deaths in a way that was pretty disturbing. I just remember that from being a young child. And then, as I said, my son is definitely pretty psychic. My daughter is an animal communicator. She wants to be a physician. I keep telling her she should be a vet. She could probably talk to them as well as she does people, but there's a strong history in my family of that, and we've lived in houses that are haunted. I'm not sure if they were haunted before we got there or if there's something about our history that's drawn things to us. The newest house, the home I'm in now, was built on a farm, and there's been no other house on this property prior to this one, and it's not very old, so fortunately we don't have anything visiting us. But the house we lived in for 5 years before this one backed up to a cemetery. And periodically after a funeral, even though we blessed everything, we'd have perfumes that didn't match anything we wore, the smell of cigar smoke or pipe smoke come through within the days after a funeral. And the house prior to that was probably a gateway. It was super creepy. We had lots of things happen there. And they all talked to Jason. Jason's 21 now, and I don't think he likes to talk about it very much, but when he was small, everybody came to talk to Jason, and we'd hear him in the middle of the night carrying on conversations with people that nobody could see.
Wow.
And when his sister was born, a couple of days after I brought her home from the hospital, Jason is 3 years older, I went into her room, and he was next to the crib, and I said, "What you doing?" And he said, "Talking to her about the angels because I don't remember what they sound like."
Oh my gosh! Oh,
and I thought that was pretty nifty. But
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And he definitely has the vibe for bad places and bad people, and his intuition's fantastic. If you ever lose anything, Wendy, you call me. We ask Jason; he'll find it for you. That's the handy part.
Very good. Yeah, good to know.
Of course, as a mother, I've lost my sanity long ago, and nobody's helped me find it yet. But
you don't want it.
No,
it's overrated.
I've embraced my weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I figure my weirdness will call other weird people to me, and then we can create our little weird world. So,
absolutely, yep.
it's not a bad thing, but yeah, my family has it, and there are good aspects. Everybody, Wendy, you've done this forever, and Denise, I know you have too. And you talk to people who have gifts or second sight or use a part of their brain that some people don't. And what I think is so important with that is we never really flaunted it. And I don't mean that in a weird way. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think that you use it, the gift that you are given, to help people in whatever way. And so for me, it's been more intuitive. For my grandmother, as I said, she could tell when somebody was dying before they knew they were dying, which was probably a blessing. My great-grandmother, I think that's kind of the direction her gift went as well. Probably that came into play with the whole medicine woman thing, and I'm sure it helped her provide healing and support to those people who couldn't get to doctors because, you know, she intuitively knew who she had the best chance of helping and who maybe needed to be guided in the, you know, to make peace with their families because they weren't going to be around too much longer. But I just, it just sort of becomes a part of who you are. And Jason, it comes out more interestingly in my son, I think. Mine is more dampened, and as I said, my daughter attracts animals, which is sort of like Ellie Mae Clampett. Everything with 4 legs or 2 legs or wings or, you know, a tail ends up appearing around our house whenever she's around. But Jason's gift is probably the most interesting. I hope as he gets older, he'll not tramp it down quite so much and maybe explore it a little bit more because he certainly has a talent that could be beneficial, but it's probably pretty scary when you're a little kid. I didn't see dead people, but I don't think he knew they were dead. So, like his great-grandpa used to come and visit him, apparently, my ex-husband's grandfather. So, perhaps it isn't as scary until they realize it's something to be afraid of.
They learn it. They learn to be afraid, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When it was about 5, someone wouldn't let him out of his room. And I couldn't get his door open. And that pretty much made us decide that perhaps that house that was built in 1888 was not where we needed to live any longer. And he said, the man won't let me out of my room. I was like, okay, I think we need to start looking for another place to live. Mm-hmm. But the only thing in the new house is maybe a cow or a chicken at some point in the farmyard. So I'm good. I plan on staying here for a while. No creepy crawlers in the middle of the night.
I do apologize. I was, about the time you started talking about your daughter being an animal empath, mine decided to rush down here and demand snacks and things, so.
Probably because I was discussing Soraya.
Yes, most likely. Mm-hmm. Well, but I'm a lot that same way, so generally that's me there. Yes.
And so you understand that, oh, don't touch my dog will not like you. Yep. And 2 minutes later, the dog is in your lap.
Exactly, yes. And that's only a problem if it's one of those 180-pound mastiffs or something. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
What's funny is those 180-pound mastiffs think they're lap dogs on me.
Yes, they do me too. And you've seen me, Denise. You know how tall I am, or am not, rather. So.
Yeah, 3'12".
Mm-hmm. Now, 4'12". It's on my medical charts. Yeah. Anyway.
Anybody who's short, I find it strange when I find people shorter than me. I'm not that tall. Mm-hmm. So, but it's, I don't know. I have a thing, animals like me, kids like me, and I always found that odd. Even when I was a teenager, little kids always seemed to come to me, and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. You know, I never wanted kids or anything like that, and here I am, four daughters later, and 2 grandkids, and apparently the one all the kids like, and my mom said it is because of I was an old soul, even back then, and I think I got that. You know, when Jen was talking about having a medicine woman in her family, one of my grandmothers was a medicine woman, and she was the one that was her great grandmother was a medicine woman as well. And they all are the ones that went on the Trail of Tears.
Wow.
And so my grandmother, or great-grandmother, so my great-grandmother was married to an Irishman, and they went on the Trail of Tears. She didn't have to go because she was married, and she was the property of her husband. So she didn't have to go. But he said, she's pregnant, and I want her to be with her family. So needless to say, they went on the Trail of Tears, but they didn't have to go. You know, she didn't have to do the walking like everybody else because they had their own vehicle, not a car, of course, but they had their own
mode of conveyance.
Yeah, they had horses and donkeys and things like that. So they got to go more in the lap of luxury, where a lot of the other natives were having to walk
and carry the babies and everything else. Yeah, according to all of the pictures I've have their travois and all this other stuff. No, she was able to ride in their wagon with all their stuff and their child that they already had. But because she was pregnant, he wanted her to be with her family. And so they went on the trail, and the child they already had passed while they were on the trail. Oh. And, well, there was I know it happened a lot, but it's still sad. I mean, the whole bit was god-awful bad.
But apparently there was nothing they could do, they said. And she gets there about 3 months later. She has my grandmother, or great-grandmother. And by the time they get there, of course, conditions are horrible. And my great-grandfather looks around and says, I can't raise my children like this. And so once winter was over, they got up and left. So they were in Tahlequah area of Oklahoma. He went and gathered up his family, had her say her goodbyes, and they moved up near Des Moines. It was a 7-day carriage or cart ride from Des Moines, which is probably not far from maybe Omaha.
Right.
Now, not, it couldn't have been too far.
Right, yeah.
7 days might be 3 hours now. I don't know. So he goes into town. He was a trapper, and as well as a farmer. So he had taken his furs into town. So this was years later. Okay. They had homesteaded and all that, and they had another child. My great-grandmother had to be like 9 years old. And so they had another baby. She was there with her mother. He left, and all the what neighbors they had, saw him. The ones he passed saw him leave, and everything. Well, a pack of wolves attacked. The kids were safe. She had told the kids to get into the house. She got attacked and killed. My great-grandmother had to bury her mother.
Oh, good Lord.
And this happened like a day after he left on his 7-day ride. So it was 7 days in, 7 days back. So he was gone about 14 days by the time, he got back. None of the settlers in the area came to help out those children.
Wow.
And so, and don't know if anybody knew about it or anything like that, but he said when he got back, the story goes that was when he decided to decline that the children were ever Cherokee and moved back to Virginia.
Can't hardly blame him.
Yeah, he said he didn't want the children didn't look like they were Native American.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so he just took them back to Virginia, declined their heritage, and married another woman, and she adopted them as her own. And at that point, nobody knew that my great-grandmother was Native American until much later in life when she was telling the stories about how her mother died. And then we found out, hey, you're this, and because he never filled out the paperwork for the Cherokee Nation, we didn't know back then. So that's just one of the stories. Of course, my mom had all kinds of them about the Trail of Tears that were passed down, and Ma died in 1972.
Oh, goodness, okay.
Yeah. So
it has been a little while. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a little while. I was, when she died, I was 7. And so I knew her. She actually saved my life when I was like 2.
Oh?
I was on the stairs, and she lived with my grandmother, lived with her daughter in her house, and I had climbed all the way up the stairs and proceeded to toddle off the top. So the stairs kind of went in a C shape, and I got to the top and decided to stand up, and I went to stand straight up, and I fell backwards. She stopped me from falling, and she fell down the stairs and broke her hip.
Oh, gosh. Well, that was...
I never fell, but you know what? She was never the same again. And what was funny was I took Lacey there back in it had to be 1988.
Okay.
And Lacey went up the stairs and started to fall down the stairs, and I saw someone pick her up and put her at the bottom of the steps.
Holy crap.
I know it was my great-grandmother.
Sure. They're watching out for all the children still.
My grandmother was sitting across the room, and she goes, I know I've been drinking, but I can't believe that what I just saw. And I said, Ma, I think Ma's here. And of course, Lacey's the one that just moved to Vegas today. She's 30. It's 2019. She's 32 years old. So this happened 31 years ago. And, I know I feel her a lot, but Ma would tell us stories. I don't remember a whole lot of them, but she would tell us stories from living in the mountains of Virginia. She lived in Saltville, and she would tell us stories about how they used the Salt Lake there. It was the only Salt Lake east of Mississippi, so it was really important to the country at the time. And they actually guarded that thing during the Revolutionary War and during the some other war as well. But it was really important to the country. And she told us how they used it for certain things during her growing up, like how they used it for curing bacon and some other things. And I always thought that it was like the Great Salt Lake, hard. You couldn't use it for anything. This lake actually has water in it. It's not like the Great Salt Lake where it's just hard as rock. And she was telling us about that. She told us the stories about dinosaurs being in this lake.
Oh, the bones?
Yeah, dinosaur bones. she'd tell us about how they would take and that you could just go out there and you could find dinosaur bones all the time. Yeah,
Wow.
really? Mm-hmm. No, that's not true, Grandma. No, it's true. There's actually, I took the kids, was it 10 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
They pulled a mammoth out of there. It's actually at the Smithsonian. I had no clue. I thought she was lying. There is, there's a place, they have a thing there where they boil the water to get the salt out. A whole bunch of these big bins or pots there, and I had no clue that all, like I said, I've been there, but I was so little I didn't remember. So when I went there 10 years ago, it was like, oh, this is amazing to see all this stuff. We don't care about this stuff when we're 5.
No, we don't. No.
But it's amazing what we care about when we're 35 and 45.
Mm-hmm.
So have you ever been to any of the salt lakes, Jen?
I have not.
I haven't. That's on my bucket list of things to do, but I have not. That's fascinating that they pulled a mammoth. It is. Amazing.
I mean, and it's not far off of 81. There's an exit off of 81 to get to Saltville. And there's really nothing back there except for these vats and the salt lake. And and then some of my family's graves. But I didn't, like I said, I didn't even know any of my family was buried there until last year. So, like I said, I'm finding out new things about the family history every time I go back to Bristol while my Aunt Belle is still alive, because she's 93. And she's telling us all kinds of stuff about my mother's father's family. They know stuff about my mother's family, but my mother's father's family is interesting on that. My dad's family, I'm just learning stuff about them, since that's a different story. I'm just learning stuff about my dad's family.
Cool.
So Jen, have you learned any unusual stories about your family that made you go, why didn't you tell me this sooner?
Yeah. Several.
Do you care to share them, or are they best left alone?
Well, the big one is probably best left alone.
Okay.
At this point.
And now we want to know.
Of course you want.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. There's a lot about my family that I would have really liked to have known much sooner than I knew it. I would love to tell you, but I don't think I can.
So you'd have to kill us.
I don't think Wendy has enough airtime.
Oh, sure. I got up to 5 hours.
You're not helping, Wendy.
Sorry about that. I was supposed to be helping. Okay, I'll try to be more helpful then. Yeah.
But yeah, and I was thinking as you were talking about, your great aunt being 93, that's someone that you really, I'm so glad you have an opportunity to visit with her and learn from her, because you have enough stuff, Denise. There needs to be a book, girlfriend. You've got a book, wonderful history. That
I've got like 3 or 4 in me. I know I do. I just need to
absolutely.
Because Wendy will tell you, just from 7 years at the Sally House, I got stuff there. I got the shows that I've done, just the history on some of the places that I've dug up, on the history I've dug up on some of these haunted locations that I don't share with people. Would amaze even the ownership of what I know. Because even Wendy will send me stuff. Denise, do you know where this is?
Yep. Or have you ever been there?
Yep. And even if I haven't, I can tell you the true history.
Well, see, and that means that you need to carve a little bit of time out every day and get those books going, because I would pick your brain for hours you told some fascinating stories tonight.
Mm-hmm.
There's fodder here for a lot of good stuff. So I'm taking it all in, and I'll be catching up with you and Wendy in the next week or so, going, remember what you said about blah blah blah. I want to know more. So I think that I think you're missing a calling there, Denise. I really do. And I'll put you and Wendy in a chat and explain the family stuff that I can't go live on the radio with tonight. But,
well, I have so many stories that I can't go live with because of the fact that I have family members still alive that it would upset. If they were dead, I'd tell you everything. I wouldn't care. Because I'm an open book. Mm-hmm. It does not bother me what people know or what they don't know. But it's the people that are alive in my family, they just don't know what the truth is. And truth, as much as the truth is needed, is not going to help them to know the truth at this point.
Exactly.
And it could cause a lot of trouble for the people that are still alive. So now when the last of my father's brothers pass, it's open season. but right now, I just can't. And I have been offered to be on a TV show about serial killers, and I'm not going to do it because family members are still alive.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, now there's a cliffhanger for you. Nobody wants to hear about that now.
Oh boy!
Well,
this should have been a Friday the 13th show, Wendy. Seriously.
Well, the thing is my father was murdered. His mother was murdered, and it was the same person. But the good news is, I don't think any of my family is actually listening tonight. But the thing is the person who killed them is a family member, and there's some other things going on in there that now everybody knows that the same person was involved in killing both of them. What they don't know is the rest of the story. So I've got the rest of the story from research that I've done over the last 30 years, but I don't need them to be upset about something that they didn't know about while they're still alive. Mm-hmm. And my dad's brother is getting a lot older, and I don't want him to be upset at this point. So when he passes, like I said, then I can go public and say everything I want to say. But it is what it is, and
Well, what you're doing though shows missing compassion, Denise, and a lot of people seem to have lost that. So kudos to you for being kind and compassionate and understanding and thinking about other people. I apologize for teasing you about the whole Friday the 13th thing, how horrific to have lost family members that way. I can't even imagine. And yet, despite that personal loss, you are kind and, as we would say in Kentucky, kind-hearted enough to look at how your sharing information would cause pain and injury to other people who are innocent in all of this. So bravo to you for having that kind of restraint. That shows a lot about your character. It truly does.
Well, it's not all about getting on TV. Wendy, like I said before, I've been on TV. I was on Romper Room when I was 5. I've been on the news. I've been on TV commercials. I've done that. That's not important. Being a good person is what's important. Being proud of who I am is important. And if I was to do that right now, I wouldn't feel like a good person. So it can wait. And if it never happens, it wasn't meant to be. So
it's good to have integrity.
And the other thing is I was so excited to have been asked. So like I told my husband, I said, if I do it at this point, it will be under anonymity. So if I do it, I will do it anonymously, and that's the only way I'll do it at this point. So that means that no family member would be hurt if I did it anonymously. So, because it wouldn't use my family's name. And so they'd never know at that point. So I would have, so I don't know. Like I said, I really don't need all the nudes in my Facebook either. I'm still cleaning that up from Ghost Adventures. That's the other thing. That part's not fun. Well, it can be. as I'm making fun of everybody.
No, we wouldn't do that.
I do it a lot.
Almost everybody I know and call friend does.
Actually, that's where the folk magic comes in handy. Saltpeter works great.
Oh, well,
would you like some apple butter with saltpeter or or some jalapenos? I use saltpeter in them.
Y'all are great.
Now, Denise, does your recipe come from your Appalachian roots for your apple butter?
Actually, yeah.
I figured
almost everything that I can comes from my grandmother, except for the jalapenos. Mm-hmm. But basically, it's a simple can. The jalapenos is basically a simple pickling recipe. It's just pickling salt, water, and vinegar. Mm-hmm. You can use it for anything. You can pickle carrots with it. Or you can use garlic if you don't want to use salt. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of, hey, how do you want to do this? But I have old recipe cards that were written by my grandmother and my mother that were handed down to them. I even have a recipe on how to use hog rendering to make soap. So, because that's when we were talking about soap earlier, that's what my mom would be the hog fat, because nothing went to waste.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they lived with. They went with the coal mine, wherever the coal mine was that they worked for. They, everything came from the company. So if they got a hog, that didn't come from the company store. They used all of it. They didn't have to use that for any payment towards anything. So if they were able to utilize that, they could sell any of that extra stuff and actually keep that, which was great because the company store would really mark things up a lot. You'd think it'd be great, but no, you ended up working for pennies a day.
Right.
And
all to keep you in that almost eternal indentured servitude, just as close as you can get without being right there in it.
Right. And go ahead.
Go ahead, Jen. Yeah.
They paid in script too, not in U.S. dollars. So the money that you got paid at a coal mine couldn't be spent anywhere except the company store because it wasn't legal tender. That was a problem too. Yep.
And so, like I said, I know. I know I've been around coal mines my whole life. When my mom moved to Kentucky, their business was L&L trucking. They actually hauled coal. My grandfather was a coal miner, and so my mom ended up being a trucker, ran the trucking company. And so I knew enough about it. I know enough about it to be dangerous. When we would go visit out in Kimball, West Virginia, where would we play? We played in the coal mines, in the abandoned coal mines. How stupid is that?
Did you see any goblins?
We saw all kinds of stuff down in there. Mm-hmm. In some of the places, I remember one time seeing this. Today they would, you saw a hat man. No, I did not see a hat man. I saw a coal miner. He was the spirit of a coal miner. Yeah, he had on a hat, but it wasn't a hat like
A fedora
It was not a top hat. It was a coal miner's hat.
Right, a hard hat with a light on it.
Yeah. And the light, there was a light. You could see the light on there. And he was walking through the coal mine, and you could see him dragging something behind him, and it looked like a pick. Scared the living daylights out of me. I thought he was real. And because at this time, I was like 10 years old. It was the year my dad died. And I mean, I knew I saw spirits, but at that time, they still looked like real people to me. So sometimes it was hard to put a distinct difference between live and dead back then. So when I see spirits to this day, they look as solid as you do, and this one looked as solid as anybody else. And he's just dragging his pickaxe behind him, just walking through the mine. And when I looked at him, he did not look like my grandfather as a coal miner. He looked older than my grandfather. The clothes didn't match what my grandfather wore when he came home from the mine. That's the only thing I noticed. Everything else seemed right. Oh, and his light flickered like it was a candle, not
like the early ones.
Right. Like I said, it flickered like a candle, so it was moving. Where my grandfather's, when it was on, it was solid. And so I knew enough to say, this is different, and we got to get out of here. And my cousins were like, why do we need to get out of here? I said, because there's a man over here, and all they could see was, darkness, and they couldn't see this man with this light on his head. And I'm like, well, he's over here, and we got to go. And they were, no. Then suddenly you heard this axe hit the wall, and they were out of there like you wouldn't believe. But that's when I'm like,
don't fail me now.
Yeah. I was hoping that was the day I didn't wear the white shorts.
Yeah, definitely.
but it was a rather odd experience to explain that to Mom when we got home. Hey, this is what I saw. But at this point, I had already been told, if you see what you think is a spirit, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody. But at this point, I didn't know it was a spirit. I thought it was a real man. And when the other cousins heard it, it was like, well, nobody's going to question me now, if it was a spirit or a man, because they heard it too. So, I told Mom, I remember telling her, I said, yeah, there was somebody down there. And she's like, well, what were you doing down there anyway? You weren't supposed to be down there. It's like, I'm 10 years old. I go where my older cousins take me, what I said.
Yep.
And I said Kimball, West Virginia. It's Kimball, Virginia. So but yeah, like I said, we did all kinds of stuff we weren't supposed to do. And my grandfather, when he passed, he was 56. He looked all of 80. He was 6'2", from what I recall. By the time he died, he might have looked like he was 5'6", from coal mines, emphysema. He died from emphysema and COPD, and that's what my mom died from, COPD, but she was 68. So I mean, I remember him well, but it was, those coal mines, it's a lot safer than it was now. But, we have a lot of coal mine stories in our family because my grandfather was one of the original rednecks in the coal mines that got the unions in there to make the mines safer.
Oh, good. Good.
Yep. I believe wholeheartedly in the coal mine unions. So, and it's important for safety. They need those. So,
absolutely.
And there are also cryptids in the coal mines. And I know you've never heard me talk about cryptids.
Oh, no, never, ever.
No, because I don't really talk about those much, but there are cryptids. And in a lot of the folklore, along the Appalachians, there are Bigfoots, and I mean, anybody who watches Mountain Monsters, I don't know how much of the Mountain Monster stuff is fake, or not fake, or sensationalized. Let's go with sensationalized. How much of that is sensationalized? Right. But I have seen things in Virginia and Kentucky that I can't explain what they are. I know that I haven't seen anything on 75 because I've only been down 75 near where Jen lives about 4 times. And a lot of time when I go down there, I'm drinking moonshine. But so I can't say with a clear mind what I've seen down 75.
Right.
But down Mountain Parkway, I've seen a lot of strange things. In fact, down Mountain Parkway about 4 years ago, there was a picture that came out on the internet. It was from an accident. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it looked like a spirit was coming up from an accident, and it was just north of, I think it was just north of the rest area there on Mountain Parkway.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah,
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Sorry, I just got a message from one of my friends, and he says, "Hey, we're burning clean coal now. Coal miners had a hard life back then, but now it's all clean."
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. It is amazing when you go through where the coal mines are now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different ball game now when you go through where the mines are now. You don't feel like you have to put the windows up on the car.
Right.
Because there's a really big coal mine over near where Holly Mullins lives, near Norton, Virginia.
Okay.
I've driven by it a couple times coming from Bristol, going to Pikeville, and it's amazing. I mean, it's huge, but it's amazing to see that, how clean that area is at this point, because I remember when it used to be filthy to go to a coal mining community. So, I mean, there's some of them are still filthy, honestly, but a lot of the newer ones are much nicer looking now than they used to be. I don't know about what Jen thinks, but I'm just saying I know a few of them on the highway on 23 look really clean.
Mm-hmm. Well, having worked in the power plants here around Kansas City, the coal burners, it's filthy. The afterburn is filthy, but that's okay.
Well,
I'm completely out of my element, so I have absolutely nothing to contribute. Know very little about coal mining. Totally clueless.
Okay.
Shall we go back to some of the more magical types, maybe the granny magic, things that have been passed down to you guys from your grannies?
I suspect it has probably got a lot of good stories.
Well, I suspect you do too, young lady.
I don't know about that.
Did you hear back from any of your buddies that you were going to tag about, having fun stories or kind of different and maybe even bizarre?
Unfortunately, I did not, because this is Spoonbread Weekend in Berea, which is an annual event that packs our town from one side to the other, and there's a balloon glow and lots of activities, and I think everybody was busy. I did not make it to any of the Spoonbread Festival activities this year, unfortunately, but I think everybody was busy, because I'm sure in the middle of the week I'll get a message back from at least 2 of the 3 people saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know what you needed." But no, everybody abandoned me and left me hanging.
Oh, man. Okay.
I know. Isn't that awful? Let's see. What do I know? If you get chiggers, You can use kerosene to kill them. Of course, then you don't want to light a match around your body because you'll explode.
Yep.
What else? Tobacco. If you take tobacco from a cigarette and mix it with your own saliva, it will help with bee stings and bug bite. I know that one. As far as manufactured products, my family swears by Porter's salve, which is a liniment salve. You can order it online from, like, the Vermont Trading Company store. It lasts for absolutely ever. It comes in a little tin. It smells of camphor, but it will help with burns and cuts and scratches and infections. What else? You're not supposed to go barefoot in the dew because it will eat your toes off. I remember that one. I do it all the time. But growing up, you weren't supposed to do that because you would get dew cracks between your toes. Not really sure what those were, but okay. Let's see what else. And now I saw on the internet the other day, I was taught, my grandmother said, you don't wash dishes in the sink during a thunderstorm or take a bath or a shower because you could get electrocuted. And I actually I thought that was ridiculous, but I saw something about that the other day, that apparently that does happen. So I'm cheating death every time I bathe in the rain. So, I like to live dangerously. Wendy, you've known me for a long time. You know that to be true.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, gosh, let's see. Heavens.
I like that one picture I saw that was the woman making the poppet that she made out of beeswax and dirt, and she was hammering nails into it, and she named it after whoever her enemy was, and she was out to... And apparently, from what I was reading, most of these things they're allowed by the Bible, even. It's all eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that whole 9 yards, and they use a lot of Bible verses in even baking bread and just a whole number of things. I was kind of astonished, yet not really, from what you had told me about being the Episcopalian witch. Was that it?
I said I sort of combine those two things sometimes, I think. But I think what you're talking about is there's a lot of Old Testament stuff that comes into play when you talk about Pentecostal religion. And, in Appalachia, there are still churches that handle snakes and drink kerosene during the church service as a way to show their trust in God. The snake handling churches are... I actually have friends who have been to one. I have never been to a snake handling church. But they do. They handle rattlesnakes and copperheads and venomous snakes during the service as a way to show that they are right with God and that they are protected by God. And
ready to die at any second, apparently.
Apparently they didn't believe. They didn't believe enough. That's why they died.
Exactly. And, there are pastors who are bitten over and over again and are fine. And then you get into, the speaking in tongues and the differences between that fundamentalist Pentecostal religion and what we consider to be 21st century Christian religion. But I think that when you're talking about the Bible verses and the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth stuff, that's all the Old Testament stuff, which is when Christianity was so incredibly vindictive in many, many ways. The New Testament sort of got rid of most of that. But in my family, there was never any thing that I would be considered, like black magic or gray magic. Everything that my family has always done has been for the good, as opposed to something that could cause harm. I never knew of my grandmother or anybody else. I had an aunt that was great aunt that was kind of weird, but even she, I don't think that any of them. In Kentucky, you'd call that quar. She was quar. She was odd. She probably had dementia really early on. Not queer as in the sense of LGBTQ, which is totally fine, but quar is an odd. She probably had dementia really early. But but no, there was never any any yucky anything. It was more about helping and healing and nurturing and growing versus harming. They're probably, my great grandmother, I think, had probably done some harm if she ever wanted to, but I never saw any of that. What about you, Denise? Does your family have a history of the good stuff or the bad stuff or somewhere in between?
My family had more of a, let's go with, on one side of the family, if you really irritated them, it was going to be on the bad side. A lot of my family, moonshiners on both sides. So it could be questionable there. Got Southern Baptist ministers on my dad's side of the family. And of course, we got serial killers, but that's a whole other problem. And but on my mom's side of the family, we had a lot of the things that were passed down ended up being the more on the good side. I have to say, when you talk about your aunt, we had all of ours. We paraded ours. We brought ours out on the porch and sat them out there every Saturday for everybody to see. And on Sunday, we dressed them up and took them to church.
Just like Suzanne Sugarbaker, exactly. Gotcha.
Yeah. And it was normal. It was normal. And the thing is we kept them where we could see them. And it's perfectly normal for our family. I mean, we knew that at every gathering we were going to have Aunt Nellie was going to get upset because somebody was going to upset her because she wasn't included in something. You know, one of her 6 kids by the 6 different daddies, was going to get upset because they felt like they were slighted for some reason or another. And they weren't. They were all treated the same. And they were all treated badly. No, they weren't. We treated them all the same. We included them in everything we did, even though we didn't want to. We still took them. If we went someplace, we took them. And I'm going to say, I'm not the oldest grandchild. I'm the oldest granddaughter on both sides of the family. I am the oldest grandchild on my dad's side. On my mom's side of the family, I'm the oldest granddaughter that was kept, that they knew about. Okay, so all the others were grandsons that were before me, but none of them were all together there. And that's what they said. They're my grandsons, but they're never going to be. Denise is going to be older than them forever. Even from birth, I was older than them. So, as far as my family was concerned, I was the oldest granddaughter, or oldest grandchild. So I was the leader. So I had to accept everybody, because if I didn't, nobody else did. So that meant even if I didn't like my cousin Mike, or my cousin Keith, or Chucky, I had to make sure that I took them with me wherever I went and made sure they were included and that everybody treated them nice. So we had that. So we made sure that, and so this would be, hey, this is my job. It's still my job to this day. I still do this with these cousins. They don't know. They have no clue that I would rather be doing something else. I still treat them the same way. It's really nice. And so part of these stories, this goes to, hey, telling them these same stories every year of how much they're loved, all this stuff, and passing these stories down because, their mental capacity is not there for them to know, to even remember how much they're loved. But to finish this story, like I said, part of our culture in that part of the country was to make sure that we brought out as offensive as it is, we brought out our crazies and we paraded them around. And it wasn't like we were saying, hey, our crazies are crazier than yours. It was basically, hey, we got to all get out and do something together, and this is how we did it. And same with the moonshining part of our family. They did the same thing, but they did it in a crazier way, and they made money at it. Some of them, we have stories about that as well. And let's see, what else do we have? We have some of the good things that our family did. We had some, the one grandma that I had on my my grandmother's grandmother, she taught us some very, very interesting things. How to hide stuff from the police. I mean, it was good. It was Tang jars are handy for hiding moonshine in your purse because they smell like Tang.
Mm-hmm.
If the cop opens it and it looks like water, it still smells like Tang. Does it smell like vodka? Got away with that for years. You know what? I don't think they sell Tang anymore, do they? At least not in jars.
I don't know.
I haven't looked. But
I haven't either,
but that was one of the funny things. But Grandma always had the best stories that made you go into thinking mode at bedtime.
Good. Mm-hmm.
You know that quiet thinking where you're going, this is making my brain hurt. I think that's a gift that my grandmother had, was she'd tell you the story, she'd get you to thinking, and it was such an odd story that you couldn't even ask questions because you didn't know where to start. But it would get your mind to thinking, and your mouth to stop moving, and your feet wouldn't move. You just lay there and listen and fall asleep. I think it was some kind of spell that she would, because to this day I don't remember the stories at all. All I remember is her voice, and it could have been anything in another language, but whatever she was saying would put you to sleep, or at least slow you down to where you could go to sleep. But that grandma had a way of just calming every situation, from even the dog. The dog would go crazy. It was a husky. He'd go crazy. And she'd just start talking to that dog, and that dog would just sit there. His head would go to its side, and the next thing you know, the dog's sleeping. And I don't know what it was about her, but she is the one that her mother was a medicine woman. And I think she's the one that I got the ability to see and talk to spirits from. I don't know. It's funny, honestly, but I really wish I knew more about some of the traditions that my mom knew about. That, in the end, when my mom was really sick with the COPD, it started affecting her mind, and some of the things started leaving her, and she started forgetting the things that she wanted to tell me, and she never wrote them down. So there's some things that we missed out on, and I really wish that there was some way I could get some of those stories back, beyond the Trail of Tears story and beyond the, all of her canning notes and recipes and things like that. But every time I find another book, she kept notes in her recipe books. So every time I go down to clean out something downstairs, I'll find another note in a recipe book that's related to historically to something in our family. But those recipe books are the key to everything in our family's folklore. Yeah, so to me, the baking and the canning, which Wendy knows, you hear that from me a lot. I'm making this. I'm making that. I'm making amaretto because of my moonshine history. I want to make something. I'm making this or that. And that's my tribute to my heritage. What do you do for your heritage, Jen?
I think it's kind of the same thing. For me, cooking is love. So cooking and gardening. Gardening is something that I do, and I try to garden organically and use some of the old ways as far as how you plant things and what you plant together and those sorts of things. I too have the old recipes and the old cookbooks. One of my grandmothers, when I decided that I was not going to become a teacher, as everyone in my family had for a very long time, decided that since I was going to major in political science and communication and had planned on law school, that I would probably never marry. So when I graduated from high school, she gave me a 1936 Encyclopedia of Cookery so I could feed myself, and a sewing machine so I could take on dressmaking in case I ever needed it. So I, not only do I have all the old family recipes, but I have an Encyclopedia of Cookery from 1936. So if my career path had not turned out properly and I had not married to have children, I would have at least been able to feed myself while I sewed clothing for other people. So, yeah, she was looking out for me, I tell you.
She also got you an iron 1 year, too, right? So you can take in ironing?
Oh, actually, no. Apparently, I did not iron to suit her, so that was not an option for me. Sewing,
I can't either. Oh, sorry.
But she was a hoot. My mother died young when I was 5, so she was the mother of the woman who brought me up, and we called her Mama Maddie. And Maddie was wonderful. She looked like a little partridge. She was fond of cherry vodka, which she said was only used for medicinal purposes, and she kept it in a flask stuck down in the side of her chair. I'm 50, so you get an idea of the cherry vodka as a teenager. And she had a crush on Burt Reynolds, to the point that 1 year for Christmas, some of the family gave her the Burt Reynolds poster that was in Cosmopolitan magazine of him naked on the rug, and she hung it in the downstairs bathroom and was so proud of it until the pastor came to visit, and then she ran and hid it in the bathtub so he would not see the naked picture of Burt Reynolds in her bathroom. So, yeah. This is the woman who said I had no future since I was not going into education, and I needed to learn to sew and feed myself. So, yeah. Hide and carry vodka and a secret love for Burt Reynolds.
That's it. My grandma with her Tang and vodka.
There you go.
So
many similarities. That's too funny.
I know. My grandmother, I swear, my grandmother never, ever, I can't remember a time that she ever drove sober. Ever. Even at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And I told Ron, I said, if she did, I don't think I had ever known it in my entire life. And I remember all kinds of stories about her, but she died when she was when I was right before I had my second daughter, and she had one of her things that she did to me was I was getting married. Okay, I was 15, not to Ron. Is somebody else, and she comes out on the porch and she goes, "You know, you don't have to do this." I go, "I know." I said, "But everybody in the area thought I was pregnant." I said, "I know I'm not, but everybody thought I was. Got to do it." She goes, "No, you don't have to do it." She goes, "We can go to Ocean City, or not Ocean City, Atlantic City." She goes, "We can go to Atlantic City right now." I go, "I know." I said, "But I can't." I said, "I got to do what I said I was going to do. I got to hold up my end of the bargain." And she goes, "I'm proud of you." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because," she goes, "you could walk right out of this right now and not hold up your end of it at all. Nobody would think anything of it because you're only 15. She goes, "You're older than that, older than I thought you were." I was like, okay. But I'm sitting there going, I still shouldn't do this. I'm only 15.
Right?
But see, she was only 14 when she got married.
Mm-hmm.
So she was 14, and by the time she was 18, 19 maybe, she had 4 kids. My grandfather went in the Navy, and by the time my mom was like 4 years old, or less, she left. She walked out on him.
Oh my, okay.
Yeah, so my mom was raised by my Aunt Belle, the one that's been telling me these stories that's 93 in Bristol. So that's why I've been going down there so much, because she's like my grandma. Because, she raised my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't know all of this when I was growing up, because my grandma was in my life, because my mom and my grandma made up. I didn't know about all this until closer to my mom dying, because my mom got mad at grandma. because her mind was going. And
right,
that's when I knew my grandma had left, but I didn't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was long story short, my Aunt Belle was like my grandma. My mom was my Aunt Belle's favorite, because she only had boys. So my mom was the only girl. And so she was raising my mom and my Uncle Jack and her 2 boys. 3 boys. And so my mom got spoiled by my Aunt Belle. So now Aunt Belle looks at me and calls me Linda's girl and thinks I'm my mom half the time. So needless to say, I like going because I get spoiled.
Yeah, being the oldest grandchild, period, on both sides kind of did that same thing to me.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear a lot of this stuff. But, this time when I go, I will ask more questions on our hillbilly past. I hear more about our bluegrass and moonshine past than the hillbilly stuff. Like I said, I can tell you a lot about all the moonshine past easily enough, because Aunt Belle's husbands, multiples, all ran moonshine. And at one time, my Aunt Belle was married to my grandmother's brother. So she was my aunt twice, I guess, my great aunt twice. So she's my Aunt Belle is my grandfather's sister, and my grandmother's sister, and then married my grandmother's brother, so made her my aunt twice.
Well, okay, in looking up some of these things, the more promiscuous or people who had, multiple, who they probably outlived, however, their spouses were known to be the white-livered witters, because their livers would have white spots all over them. And then in autopsies, it proved to be true. So, that's kind of a weird one to me, but okay.
Yeah.
White-livered witters. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Now I've got that picture and the article in the Facebook event page. I'll try to put it on the chat, and we'll keep chat up until probably Wednesday morning. So, but anyway, just some interesting weirdness that I've ran across as I was looking stuff up. Oops, sorry.
Not something that I would aspire to be, a white-livered withered.
Yes,
witter,
yeah.
Witter. That is
WIDDER, yeah.
Witter, like a widow, witter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, not on my bucket list.
No, that's not. I don't know. So, I know that there. You talk about stuff that's kind of strange. I have a lot of cousins that married cousins.
Okay.
Which is actually normal in the Appalachians.
Yeah.
And people will sit there and go, so when you go to a family reunion, how's that work? Is it like speed dating? And I said, yeah, kinda. In some cases, I said, but in my case, luckily, I was already married to somebody from out of town, and I was teasing somebody. I said, luckily, when we started all this out, I said, my mom's from Saltville, my dad's from Lynchburg, so different sides of the state, different parts of 81, and that back then, that was really important to differentiate, because of the fact that when I went to my family reunion, my mom's going, well, these are your cousins, and I go on both sides, and she's going, yep. And I'm like, how in the heck does that happen? And then finding out that cousin Jean here and Roy are my double first cousins, and I'm like, oh, I need headache medicine, Mom. I need my rheumatoid medicine there, Granny. And that's when I found out that, for years I thought my Aunt Belle was my grandmother's sister because she looks like my grandmother. And lo and behold, no, she's your grandfather's sister, and they were just best friends. So she was best friends with my grandmother, was best friends with my grandfather's sister, and I was like, oh. And like I said, I was getting a headache listening to my family tree, and so for a while there, I thought my family tree was like this line. I mean, just a line. And then I found out, no, it's a vine. It's a squiggly vine that kind of circles around on itself. And, and so some of this, so when they talk about, this intermarrying stuff of families, that they're, pigtails and all that stuff, that didn't happen in my family. So I don't know. I guess we have enough out stuff there that didn't happen. But cool. That's good. But some of the things that, there's all these old wives' tales, and I always wonder about which of them are really true and which ones aren't. Mm-hmm. And what do you think about those old wives' tales, Jen?
Jen may be gone. Her son just got home, and she was going to have to jump off, and I guess it just happened quicker than we had anticipated.
I'm going to have to,
you're still there. Okay, good.
I'm still here. I'm going to have to hop off here in just a minute and find out the status of car repairs and all those good things. I think that many old wives' tales have some basis in fact and in truth, but I think that we all have the tendency to embellish things. So some of them I kind of question, but I've seen so many things that were considered to be odd or unusual or stereotypical old wives' tale that work. Whether it is, removing gnats and flies from your house by using apple cider vinegar and a little bit of soap in a dish when you bring in fresh produce, to hanging Christmas balls in with your tomatoes to keep the birds from eating your tomatoes or your fruit. Things like that don't sound like they would make that much sense until you actually do them and they work. Or even the idea of planting with the moon. For a lot of people, that don't follow the almanac or the old ways, there's the idea that would be silly and ridiculous. But if you actually do it, you tend to have a better harvest. So I tend to be a researcher. So when I hear these things, I like to go do some digging and see what I can find out to determine whether or not I think they're going to be valid. And I get surprised because people tell me things all the time that I have no idea about that end up being things that work. So in a roundabout way, I guess I believe in a lot of old wives' tales. I think that
I'm like you.
A little bit about the term old wife, but I want to thank you guys for having me on tonight, and I'm sorry for having to hop off early. I just need to catch him before he heads to bed. And Denise, it was wonderful to talk with you. Wendy, I hope we can do this again.
Oh,
Anytime
absolutely.
you need someone to chat with, I am always available, and we have so much fun.
Oh,
so
yes.
I don't want to bail too quickly, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to.
Well, it's about time anyway. Believe it or not, it's almost we're about 5 minutes out from the end of the show. So,
wow, so I did well. Awesome, perfect timing. Well, thanks a bunch, guys. Have a great night, and we'll talk again soon.
It was good meeting you, Jen, and maybe I'll catch you when we're going down to Gatlinburg next time.
Oh, I'd love it. You'll have to stop by Berea. We'll get coffee. Thanks so much. See you guys later.
All righty. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, when she was talking about the vinegar and soap,
Mm-hmm.
I use vinegar and soap, or apple cider vinegar and soap with a little bit of water and a touch of bourbon to catch my fruit flies. Because I found that every time Ron opens a little bit of bourbon during my show, all the fruit flies in the house, even if we didn't have any before, happen to show up as the minute he opens his bourbon.
Interesting.
So I have decided to put a couple drops of bourbon in with it, and I catch all of them right away. So
nice, those are a pain in the. I hate them, and they're bad this year.
They are, and same as the toads are bad this year because of all the rain. So, but yeah, I have to deal with that kind of stuff as well. So, but that one does work. The Christmas balls and with tomatoes works every time. It does. It confuses the living daylights out of the birds, especially if it's a different color other than red.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, because they don't know what they're going for.
That probably won't do much for the squirrels and the raccoons, though, unfortunately.
No, not. Well, it might. You never know.
True.
But for the birds...
Make them heavy enough that they fall off and hit the squirrel.
Right. But, I mean, with the reflection and stuff, on the glass balls anyway, it reflects back at them and they can't really see the fruit.
I had never heard of that before now. Cool.
So, but yeah, people don't think of old wives' tales and everyday stuff, but 99% of old wives' tales are common sense.
Yes, they are. Just, it's kind of a lost art. The growing, everybody growing their own food and different tricks of that particular trade as well.
Yeah. And
they've just been lost.
We watch all these survival shows, and a lot of that stuff, you'll be watching it, and it's stuff that you've heard. If you pay attention to the old wives' tales and stuff, it's all common sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just makes you
but you just don't
smile.
Think about it. Yeah,
yeah, or it's not said in a way that sounds like an old wives' tale, but when you read about it, it's like, okay, okay.
Oh, but that little light bulb comes on.
Yeah, but it's always interesting to see what, what's considered an old wives' tale now, because they've changed over the years.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, we could talk all night about we could talk all night anyway, but...
We're just kind of that way, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But
we're not going to do that to everybody.
No, we won't do that to y'all. Most of you are, it's bedtime and things like that. Probably a good place to shut her down. Denise, who do you have on your show tomorrow night? And please tell everybody about your show.
My show is called The Paranormal Pride, and tomorrow night my guest is Alex Matsuo. And she's going to come on and talk about, something pretty much what she's been doing in the last 3 years. She was recently on Most Terrifying Places in America. It was last October. And I was so excited to see her on that. And so I'm going to have her on this Monday. And next Monday I have Karen Smurl on from the Smurl Family Haunting, which some of the rumors on the internet say that would be the Conjuring 3 story, but I don't know that for a fact, because I know that when her father was alive, they didn't want anything to do with the stories. That everything had to be very factual and had to go with the true story of their haunting. And there's a book by Robert Curran that was co-written with the Warrens and the Smurl. Her parents, the Smurls, called the Haunted. That's about the Smurl family haunting. So I think it's going to be great. I hope it actually happens this time, because the last time I was supposed to have Karen on, her father fell on the ice and broke his hip, and it wasn't. He was never the same after that.
Oh dear.
So I was never able to rebook her until recently. So, and that's been. I think he died just over a year ago. So, and I've been friends with her for quite a while when I was helping Ken and Farrah with The Real Deals, being one of their moderators and stuff. So, because she was on their show. And then today I got I got an exciting book that I'm starting to read called The Man from the Train, from Bill James and Rachel McCarthy James, out of Lawrence, Kansas.
Neat.
So
okay.
It's about serial killer that they think that the serial killings that started, that had the Villisca axe murders and the Paola axe murders, Ellsworth, Kansas, and all them,
right?
That they started in 1898 as opposed to 1910. That there were 101 killings instead of 25.
I think we have discussed that before, but for the rest of the folks,
yes.
you know it's out there. Yeah, there is a connection.
So I am going to read that book, and I've already sent a message request to the daughter of the book and said, hey, I'd really like to talk to you guys if I can, and we have a connection here. Orrin Jackson was my husband's great uncle, the sheriff in the Villisca murders. Hopefully they'll decide to be on my show. And so, because they need to convince me, I hope this book convinces me that either they went with the same killer I did, or they can convince me that it's somebody other than who I think did it.
Very good, then.
So
I hope they get back with you, and yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. But her dad, I think, is a teacher out at KU.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nice.
So I didn't know that they were local until I looked her up today. So it'll be interesting to find out what I find out. And then we're going to the Van Meter Festival this weekend.
Now, where is that one?
Van Meter, Iowa. The Van Meter Visitor Festival.
Okay.
It's about the visitor that came back in 1903. It's similar to like the Mothman Festival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, apparently there was a Batman-type creature that showed up in 1903 in Van Meter, and they actually shot at it. Multiple people saw this thing and shot at it. And so we're going up there for the Van Meter Visitor Festival this Saturday.
I'm trying to find a link, but I haven't seen one yet. I'll get one and put it in all the chats and in the Facebook page. And
it's only on Facebook that I could find. And it's the festival it's just called Van Meter Visitor Festival, and it's September 28th from noon to 8:30. And they actually have walking tours that you can take. They're only $2.
Oh wow!
For the walking tour, there's a walking tour at night at 8:15, and you can go do the tour with who is it? Chad. Let's see. Let me see here. I sent him a message. He answered me this morning. Chad Lewis is doing the walking tour, and he's an author as well as a YouTuber, and quite a few other things as well, from what I can tell. And some of our favorite people are actually speakers at this event. One of the speakers is Matt Bennett. He's going to be talking about the Manila Schoolhouse. There's going to be music there by Josh Hurd.
Cool.
Dudathon.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the booths there, or vendors there, is going to be Nathan Leet, who's an author as well. Zelia Edgar is going to be there. She's going to be talking about orbs, a crossfield anomaly. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like it's going to be interesting. Steve Ward is going to be doing a talk about the interconnectedness of paranormal phenomenon. Thought that sounded really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Nash Hoover, Chasing Legends. So that sounds kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And then Michael Huntington's doing one, Paratravel, Cryptotourism, and Unusual Family Outings. Sounds like my kind of thing. That sounds like stuff I do all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Techniques for finding and exploring strange places. So, like I said, I found a few things here that sound like fun. But these tours, there's 2 tours that are bus tours, but at $2, you might as well go. But the event itself, the event itself is free. It's all outside. It's only supposed to be in the 70s, and it's just west of Des Moines.
Perfect weather.
So, and we're going to go out Friday, go hang out at the casino there. I was going to do some sports betting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to lose some money on the slots.
Sure.
And why not? I'm going to say right
not?
now, I'm going to lose some money on the slots. Maybe I'll be wrong and maybe I'll win. But nice little casino there at Lakeside in Osceola, Illinois, or Iowa. Osceola, Iowa. It was a nice little place, and I was actually amazed at how nice this little place was.
Neat.
So,
that sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, it's only 3 hours north of here, so it's like an hour and a half north of Liberty.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's quite a bit closer to this. Cool. Very cool. Everybody should check that out.
Yeah, it was really neat. We walked out of our hotel room, and there was a little lake right there.
Oh, neat.
The kids in the room next to us, apparently all the kids were on this floor. They were taking the frogs out of the lake and putting them in their refrigerator. So anybody in room 130, or in L30, at the hotel there at Lakeside Casino, be prepared. There might be frogs in your fridge.
Ew.
all we heard were the kids running in and out.
I'm sure.
But they were having fun.
Well, yeah.
But it wasn't our room. We didn't bring the kids. We were by ourselves. But we just went this weekend. We went up there this weekend and checked it out. And we had an executive room, and I was like, did they put us on the floor with all the kids? And apparently they did, because there was kids on both sides of us. And we went out the door because the first floor has a patio. I was like, oh, that sounds kind of neat. So we went down. We took that room, and we go down there and we look outside. And this lady comes back with a fishing pole, and the mother yells in, "Where's those frogs?" And the kid goes, "They're in the refrigerator." Like, oh, crap. So they'll be fresh, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
I was like, oh, crap.
But were they alive or dead, you know?
They were alive.
Oh, my God.
But so when we looked outside on Sunday morning, or Saturday, was it Sunday? Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. It was pouring down rain, and there were frogs everywhere.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it just made me laugh, though.
Well, yeah.
It was hilarious. That is all I could think. I was like, they're not my kids. First thing I thought, they're not my kids. I'd hate to get the bill for that. Because they asked me if I had any pets when we checked in. I said, no. I said, unless there's a stray cat sitting around. I said, I don't think there's any problem. No, they're around. I was like, great. I said, no, I don't have any pets with me. So, but that would have been funny as heck, though, if we'd come out with pets. But
yep.
But if you got kids and you want to go check out this casino, it even has an indoor saltwater pool.
Oh, nice! Wow,
yeah.
It really is family friendly then, just extremely.
Yeah, they just can't go past where the casino is. You know.
Sure.
The hotel is friendly for everybody else. It's just they just can't go past a certain part, and that's it. But it was a nice little place, and it's not like Prairie Band where the whole town's dead because the casino came in. It was actually really nice. I was actually impressed, especially just coming from Vegas.
Oh, yeah, world of difference. Yeah.
So,
alrighty, yep.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. So,
thank you for being on.
And I forgot to tell everybody, my show's on WBHM-DB.com every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. And coming up in November, I'm going to have a couple special shows on a Tuesday or Thursday night, depending upon what works best for the network. And that's the only thing I know that's going on. And other than that, listen to Wendy's shows on her Sunday nights and on her Wednesday nights. She's always got great guests and always unusual.
Almost always, but that's kind of me in a nutshell. So.
Oh yeah.
Yep. The world of weird. But yeah, and this Wednesday we'll be talking to a young man who has done a documentary on the Hat Man phenomena, and our psychic medium friend from Oregon, Seth Michael, will be on as well and talk about his encounters with the different and various Hat Men. Hat Man or Hat Men at that point? But anyway, catch us here Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central. Figure out the time zones if you're elsewhere. And hope to see you all there. And I guess with that, I will take you out with some Appalachian music, just for the fun of it. Red Rocking Chair by I wrote that down. Like the Coon Sisters or something like that from 1968. But anyway, y'all have a good rest of your Sunday night. I know it's Monday Eve, so thanks for hanging with us. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Ain't got no use for a little red rocking chair. Got no sugar, honey, baby, here. Who rocked that cradle? Who sang that song? Who rocked that cradle when I'm gone? I rock that cradle, I'll sing that song. I rock that cradle when you're gone. Done all I can do, said all I can say. Gonna see my honey next big day. Ain't got no use for a little red rocking chair. Got no sugar, honey, baby, yeah. Ain't got no use for a little red rocking chair. Got no sugar, honey, baby, yeah.
That's all, folks.